Coming back again, week 2 NFL podcast. Here we are with the I Bet Fantasy Sports podcast. How are you this week?
Good. Let's get rolling right into it.
Yeah, well, real quick, you want to recap anything happened last week? Any big plays? Obviously, we had the Jordan Love injury on Friday. Aaron Rodgers looked like he couldn't move at all. Joe Burrow had nothing going on out there. I mean, a lot of
I
stuff.
think that Deshaun Watson is available on lots of waiver wires. That's my only take.
I think he's definitely available everywhere right now. But all right, week 2, we've got a good matchup on Friday. I think it's probably going to be the best game of the week. Oh, I said Friday. It's Thursday. Big matchup. We got Buffalo Bills taking on the Miami Dolphins in Miami. What are your thoughts on this one?
Should be a super high scoring game. All the fantasy guys that you should start in this game, Allen Cook, Shakur, and Coleman are Shakur is really turning into somebody that's worth watching as a third wide receiver, and he could turn into that. We know that the Bills will be using at least 2 targets big time, meaning, in the past you've sort of had the Diggs role, and then you've had Gabe Davis in the past. And I think Shakur is somebody you really want to take a look at here. Miami, of course, looked strong offensively in week 1. Tyreek was strong, and all the regular guys. I think at running back, there's a lot of question marks. And if you're going to get Achane or, who's going to start for them, I think that's really going to be the question mark.
Miami's getting 2.5. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think they have a little bit of an edge here playing at home. That's always an edge for them. But I'm going to go with Buffalo. Their offense looks stronger, and I think there's the underlying current in terms of Josh Allen this year is that without Diggs, it's an addition by subtraction, meaning he's going to be able to just move the ball around instead of having to feel that pressure of forcing in the ball to Diggs all the time. And I like the Bills in this one in a high scoring game, 33-27, 33-30, something like that.
Yeah, I think we definitely saw how effective Josh Allen can be even without Diggs out there. So
absolutely.
Then Sunday morning, we have the New Orleans Saints taking on the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry World. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Carr looked pretty good in week 1. I think Carr and Kamara are your definite starters here. Chris Olave. And Taysom Hill got a lot of action. I think definitely starting tight end in most leagues. Dallas, we don't know if that was just the benefit. They were the benefactor of really uninspired quarterback play by Deshaun Watson. But Dak looks great. Ezekiel Elliott, it looked like he has a new lease on life. CeeDee Lamb's a definite starter in this one. Brandon Cooks probably in deeper leagues, and that's about what you have in this game.
I think the big standout from that game, from that first week 1, was going to be Elliott. A lot of people probably had him on the bench, probably wasn't starting. But, I mean, after he got to rest for a year, those legs look fresh. So I think he's going to be the big one. If you got him, you're playing him this week.
Yeah, I think we've seen this before, like in baseball. I remember the year that Buster Posey was out for the year during the COVID year. He came back in the next year and had one of his better years before he then ended up retiring. And I think he is, it doesn't seem like, Zeke didn't get a lot of playing time in New England last year, and I think his legs had a chance to freshen up after being, the workhorse running back in Dallas for all those years. He looks fresh.
All right. Following that, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Detroit Lions in the Dome. Where you at?
Yeah, I think Baker Mayfield looked outstanding in week 1. Rashad White definitely. Bucky Irvin, look at Bucky Irvin start stealing. He was much more effective than White in this game, in the last week's game, and I would look for him to continue to kind of vulture more and more playing time. And that's a great kind of pickup if he's available in your league. Take a look at that. Maybe somebody to stash. Mike Evans, Godwin played very well. Really good starters. And Detroit had a weird, very strange game. I mean, they were offensively outplayed by the Rams most of the game. Then they kind of came to life with the running game late. But a lot of the top guys in this game, including Laporta in game week 1, did not do well. Either did Amon St. Brown. I would think that the offense would be a little bit different in week 2 in this game. And I would look to play those starters again. Don't be down on them too much for a bad week, but definitely go with your starters here with Gibbs, Montgomery, and I think what's going to be a very high scoring game here, 34-31 in that range.
Yeah, really quiet game from a lot of those big names in Detroit. I mean, like you said, I don't think it's worth sitting anyone. I think all the same guys are still starting out there. So,
yeah, you got to play your guys you're drafted. You're going to regret it if you don't. It always happens that way. And you think, oh, they had a bad week. There's no trend here. It's just a week where they were, they had probably a little bit different game plan with the Rams game. And a lot of guys were rusty. There was not good quarterback play in week 1 for many teams. I think Josh Allen probably was the best in week 1.
All right, well, following that game, we have the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau. No Jordan Love.
Going to be an interesting game, I think. You're going to see here very limited possessions. Green Bay knows how to play a game like this where you kind of grind out possessions. That's how they beat the Chiefs last year, where they just essentially had like 6 or 7 really long drives. And I think Green Bay is going to try to grind this out with the running game. And I think you're going to see a very defensive minded kind of low scoring game here, 20-17. Packers apparently are going to start Malik Willis. That's not worth taking a risk on, chance on in your fantasy league. Kind of sleeper here is Emmanuel Wilson, pending the back injury to Josh Jacobs. That could be a potential start. Marshawn Lloyd still dinged up at the hamstring. Jaden Weed Watson. These guys are all kind of questionable starters now because we don't know what Willis is going to look like. And so I would kind of shy away. Anthony Richardson had the big bomb in week 1. He's a starter right now in most fantasy leagues. Jonathan Taylor is also a starter. And Pittman Jr., probably the guys you want to take a look at here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's tough to get behind any of those Packers guys without Jordan Love. But I mean, like you said, I think those Colts guys, Pittman Jr., Richardson, I think they're all going to be guys that I take this week. So following this sad game in Lambeau, we have the New York Jets taking on the Tennessee Titans. What are we thinking?
Well, I think Rodgers proved that he's still the same. He still has a good arm, but he's not very mobile. And the Jets offensive line, they did an okay job protecting him against the Niners. I think it's a bad look. It's sort of like, you don't want to kind of evaluate his whole season based on that one game. But also you saw that he was not very mobile. And he used to make a lot of big plays, extending the plays and getting out of the pocket. I think Rodgers would not be starting for me in most leagues. Breece Hall, I think, will have a better outcome in this game. And then I would look at Garrett Wilson as a starter, and that's about it as far as the Jets go.
Sorry,
Let me go through the Titans really quick here. Will Levis was absolutely horrible if you watch that game. I mean, their coach was so they said the coach said if they just sort of punted on first down, they probably would have had a better chance to beat the Bears because they just imploded on offense. There was a play where Levis basically like threw the ball back to the defense. It was the most ridiculous play. I couldn't even see it. Maybe Pollard here at running back. That's somebody you can start here. And Ridley, but those are reaches in this game. So I would say I'd probably be very wary of most of the Titans right now.
I agree. I think we really saw how little Rodgers wants to move. Kind of reminded me of like Kirk Cousins, the way he's back there. He doesn't really want to, they had that same injury. So it's older guy scared to get out there and throw it again. Doesn't want to get hurt.
But I think it's a get back game though for the Jets though, because the Titans looked really terrible. And the Bears did not play well, and they won that game essentially on special teams and defense. And I think, the Jets are going to probably limit. I think with Rodgers still coming back, he might have an okay game, maybe pushing. I mean, it's a 1.5 touchdown kind of line in this game, but I wouldn't be pushing for much more. And I would think that they're going to play a very defensive-minded kind of ball control offensive game if they can get some possessions to build some more support and up in that offense. But I don't see it as a great day for the offenses here. And I think this is a very low scoring game, about a 20-13, maybe Jets grind out that win.
You think the Jets are going to cover the 3.5?
Yeah.
Cool. Next game is San Francisco, Minnesota.
Well, I think the Niners proved, and they showed that they are one of the top teams in the NFL as they dominated the Jets. And they did it they did it with a backup running back. And that was kind of I got to tell you, that was like a Mike Shanahan. That was like Mike Shanahan right there, pulling out like McCaffrey and saying he wasn't going to play at the last second. That was what his dad used to do. Kyle did the exact same thing. And, it screwed a lot of fantasy owners who had McCaffrey and didn't have a backup on Monday. And that's just a rule anyway. If you can, and you have a guy who's maybe on the fence on a Monday night game, you don't have anybody you can pull out. So you got to be wary of that going forward. But Jordan Mason was incredible. That's just a great running team. They just know how to run the ball. They have an attitude about doing it. And they get everybody in there, including some of their best offensive players are great blockers as well, and that's Debo and George Kittle. In this game, I think a good game for Purdy here. I think Purdy should be extremely productive, and I would definitely look to start all your regular Niners in this game. Minnesota's defense still has a lot. They have a lot of holes, and I would be definitely loading up on them. In terms of Minnesota's offense, I think this is where you like, oh, yeah, it was great playing Minnesota. Minnesota had a nice week 1. Sam Darnold looked really good. But I think in this game, these are borderline starters here. I think you definitely have to want to start Justin Jefferson. In deep leagues, maybe Jones. But I wouldn't be starting Darnold against the Niners defense.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Niners, what they do so well because they have such a good pass game is they make it scary. So you have to defend that. But then when they run the ball, they have such a dominant run game as well. So definitely going to be
one of the stats. one of the stats that Rodgers faced had last week playing the Niners defense was he had the ball in his hands for the least amount of time for a quarterback, meaning his release timing was good, but that wasn't always good. That just meant he was getting that ball out to try to not take a sack and not get hit. And so they bring a lot of pressure. That's still one of the toughest defenses in the league to face.
Following the Niners and the Vikings, we have the Seattle Seahawks taking on the New England Patriots in New England. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think New England got kind of a nice opening win, playing strong defense, but this is still, there's nobody really here worth touching fantasy wise here. Ramondre Stevenson, maybe in deeper leagues. That's about it for the Patriots. I think Seattle showed that this is a very good team, probably one of the better defenses. And if you have them as a fantasy defense, definitely somebody to look at. They're going to probably be hurting fantasy owners all year between Walker and Charbonnet, who's going to get the goal line scores. This is a good but a low scoring game. I think this is going to be something like 23-10 Seattle. So not a lot of fantasy action in this, but it's worth starting your Metcalf in this one for sure, and Walker, and I'd probably be borderline on Geno Smith, but I would start those other offensive players.
Yeah, I think we saw last game those running backs for Seattle are just so deadly around the red zone. It's very easy for them. So I agree. Now, do you think Seattle is going to cover in this game? I believe the spread's 3.5.
Oh yeah, I like Seattle in this game. I think it's one of the least talked about teams, really underrated, with a new coach, but also with a lot of talent. Let's keep in mind that the Russell Wilson talent from that trade is playing, and they have a lot of guys on defense. It's a very good defensive team, probably one of the better defensive teams that people don't talk about. Probably definitely a top 5, top 10 for sure, maybe top 5 defensive team in the league.
All right, up next we have the New York Giants taking on the Washington Commanders. Where you at?
Well, Giants, that was pretty pathetic showing offensively, where you have Daniel Jones essentially getting booed in the game. I think we saw a nice effort from Malik Neighbors. I think Singletary is worth starting in this one as well. As far as the Commanders, I think you saw, Jaden Daniels, kind of like going back to the running game when he needed it to move the ball. I think it shows the young quarterbacks did not do all that well. I think Jaden Daniels is still, a special player, but it's going to take a lot of time to develop. I think the wide receivers are definitely fencers here, meaning I'd be on the fence if I'd start him. McLaurin's the best, obviously, but and Brian Robinson definitely would start in most, 2-back leagues for sure. He'd be a starter.
Yeah, I agree. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with this one. I really don't think there's much to add to that. It's kind of a tough game to find any light in. Up next, we've got the Chargers and the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. What are you thinking?
Well, I think it's going to be a really simple game. I think they're going to stuff it down their throats with the run. I think in this game, the Chargers, you saw it last week. They have those 2 running backs. I think both Dobbins and Edwards are probably starters this week for you. We saw that Ladd McConkey got picked up in a ton of leagues. I saw that in most of the leagues, Ladd McConkey, who's, probably going to develop into the number 1 wide receiver for the Chargers. But, Herbert is not like an elite fantasy starter right now, just because this team doesn't have a lot of dependable wide receivers yet. And I think the style of play in LA for the LA Chargers is going to be a very run control, run game defensive team. That's the Harbaugh way. And I think so you're going to see that play out. So Herbert's going to always be around 1.5 touchdowns. That's going to be kind of his benchmark. So I don't think you're getting a lot more than that. The guy's a great quarterback, potentially when this team builds in the future. And as these guys step up and develop, I think, you'll see that number go up. But right now, I think the running backs are there, and I think you're on the fence on Herbert.
All right, we got this one at Chargers -6. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think Chargers -6 is a good call in this game. And I think Carolina, going into Carolina, talking about their starters, I don't think you start anybody there. And I think, unfortunately, Bryce Young, probably is going to be, it's just unfortunate. Sometimes a player is a victim of circumstances. And I think the team is not very talented. I think that they've put him in a very difficult position. And I think that he could be out of the league very soon, unfortunately.
Do you think if he would have held out and played another year in college, he would have gone before Caleb?
It's tough to call. Caleb didn't have a great senior season. I mean, his last season, I should say, was not a great year. So we could have seen things change, but it's just on the measurables, and they draft so much on the measurable size and your arm ability, those put Caleb ahead for sure.
All right. Following the Panthers game, we have the Cleveland Browns taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville.
Well, this is one where you got to watch and see what happens with Cleveland, because we did, unfortunately, there was another lawsuit that developed with Deshaun Watson with his past history of problems, and so that's already a big distraction. Then you also have the fact that I think the word around the NFL is that Deshaun Watson looks like he doesn't want to play football anymore. And that's just too bad, but it doesn't look like he does. And I would think that in order to, the coach there, Stefanski, I think he's going to be under a lot of pressure to play Winston because the team members aren't going to be wanting to deal with Watson. I think Amari Cooper wants out. Like he would have got to the Niners if they could have made that deal. So that's a team that definitely has a lot of challenges. And offensively, you don't have a lot of guys playing there. And you also have Njoku who's out for this game as well. So, they're going to be starting like Jordan Atkins. But I mean, why would you look at any of these offensive players when Watson played as terrible as he looked, played really uninspired football? And then in Jacksonville, I mean, you don't have a great offense there. I mean, I think that's the team we talked about it. They're kind of going sideways and down. Etienne is probably my only starter. I like Ingram. He'd be starter too, but that's about it here. With any confidence, and you got Trevor Lawrence who's on the fence here, maybe a 1.5 touchdown guy, but that's about it. But it looks like he's throwing a lot of picks again.
All right, we got Jaguars -3 in this one. Where's your head at?
My head in this game, it's probably like a game I don't want to touch. But if I had to bet it, I would take the Jaguars -3 and just hope for the push because I don't think this is going to be a high scoring game. I think it's going to be 2017 or 17-14 garbage like that. But you don't have to bet every game. I mean, to me, this is not a game I want to bet because the guys stink. I mean, there's too many stinky players. There's nobody here you want to watch. It's going to be more of it's a futile effort here.
We have the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is, Baltimore is going to have had all that extra time. Probably a really frustrated team here after losing to the Kansas City Chiefs in the opener. I think you have a frustrated team here playing against, a Las Vegas Raiders team who pretty much offensively was shut down. I think for Baltimore, I didn't like Baltimore in week 1. I didn't like what their offense was about. I think they went away from Henry in week 1. And I think what you're going to see is they're going to go back to Henry and they're going to be able to use him in this game. It's going to be a defensive game. The Raiders defense still looked pretty good against the Chargers until it got worn down a little bit by the run game late in the third and the fourth quarters. But I think Jackson's your starter for sure. I would go with Henry in this one. I think he's going to have a much better performance than he did in week 1. I think Zay Flowers and Andrews are starters here. I think Andrews and Isaiah Likely, that could be one of the best 1-2 pairings. I don't think huge games for anybody here, except maybe Henry, because I think that they're going to be a little bit, I think the word on the street was, why did you get Henry if you're not going to wear him out? And they fell a little bit into love, in love with, Lamar Jackson in the running game. And I think that was a recipe for a guy to get injured. It was not a good scene. I didn't like the way they used him. Every time they needed a play, he was just running the ball. And I thought that's not a progression for this team. I think in terms of the Raiders, they didn't look good at all. And I would say, anybody who had like Devontae Adams in week 1 was like, what is this? It's like, none of these guys really did much in week 1 against a really, a perky, really good Chargers team with a lot of young people. They don't, a lot of good players and name players. They played really well and shut down the Raiders. And I think the Raiders are getting yet another tough matchup. And this is not an easy game for them to go into Baltimore after Baltimore lost week 1. So I think, betting man here, I'd be taking the Ravens all the time, all day to cover here. And I don't think you're going to get much out of this. You know what? This is one, I know it's a big line, but I think this is one where I'm not expecting a lot from this Raiders offense. I haven't seen it yet. I have doubts, and I think this could be like a 14-point win for the Ravens.
All right. After the morning games, we got our first afternoon game. We got the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona.
Kind of fun teams to watch because they're both highly offensive, great offensive players. I think, Stafford showed how good he was in week 1. It was a disappointing loss for the Rams. I mean, that was a game that, having been a big fan of like the NFC Central, which is now the North, I've seen the Lions blow games where they could have won them. And this was a game where the Lions should have lost and they kind of came up with the win somehow. But if you're, for the Rams, you saw Stafford getting pounded a lot and played really great. The only thing my concern on Stafford is, I don't know, he can't take those kind of hits every week. He's not going to see them every week. But, against the Lions, he really get pounded. Arizona is not going to be quite as formidable on defense. But, Stafford's a start for me. Kyron Williams is a start for me. we have Cooper Kupp was amazing again. Unfortunately, we're going to have no Puka in this one, and I think those are your starters. You maybe want to take a deeper look at the Marcus Robinson coming in as the number 2 with Puka out of the game, because Stafford will find and check down through all his receivers. And in terms of in terms of the Arizona team, I think Arizona, I like Kyler. Kyler's one of my favorite players to watch. I still think he's a top 10 guy. They have a lot of good offensive players. They didn't get the ball much at all to Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, he'd probably be my 3rd wide receiver right now. I think he should have better numbers. You do see this a lot when you see a team when they don't call up a rookie wide receiver's number. But, here's what you have to remember. Rookie wide receivers traditionally take 2 or 3 years to develop. There's a lot to learn in year one. Marvin Harrison's a good player. He's not a super fast guy, but he's going to be kind of like a 1st and 10 chain mover guy. And so we didn't see much out of him week 1. I think the starters here definitely are Murray, Connor, Harrison, probably in a deeper league, and Trey McBride's definite starter here for the Cardinals.
All right. Well, Cardinals -1. What are your thoughts?
I would not bet the Cardinals. I'd take the Rams. I think the Rams are a better team.
Yeah, surprising to see the Cardinals getting 1 there.
Well, a little beaten up, Puka being out, and it was a tough game that they played this week. But a physical game like that, sometimes teams do not bounce back as well.
Well, all right, next afternoon game, we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Denver Broncos in the Mile High Stadium.
Well, isn't this one a disappointment now that, we know Fields is going to start for the Steelers and we're not going to get the Russell Wilson matchup? And there's something wrong with that going on there in Pittsburgh. I think, is he really injured? We don't know. It's just, but he's the definitive backup. And I think what the Steelers hope is that they can use Fields and win games and keep him in there, and maybe they'll have a quarterback who develops. But he still looks like he's the same guy. Not much accuracy. When he needs to make a play, he's going to run. In terms of the running backs, Najee is a starter, but, he's kind of borderline. These wide receivers, Pickens and Van Jefferson and Freiermuth, I mean, they're okay in deeper leagues, but they're not like, outstanding starters here. I really kind of questionable starters. In terms of the Broncos against this Pittsburgh defense, I'd say, Bo Nix, no. Javonte Williams, maybe you need a running back. Sutton. I'm not seeing a lot of starters here in this game for most fantasy guys.
Well, I think the Steelers showed last week why they're going to be probably a 9 to, I don't want to give them 9, but an 8 to 10 win team. I mean, their defense with Mike Tomlin, they're going to consistently go out there and win games.
But it's what they do all the time. They draft for defense. They draft for sacks. They always have one of the top defenses. They've been doing it for years, and Mike Tomlin coaches that way. The problem is you're not going to win in the playoffs with that. That's why they might make the playoffs. Maybe they will squeak in, but they'll lose in the first round.
Yeah, well, we got Pittsburgh -2.5 in this one.
Yeah, I take Pittsburgh. I take Pittsburgh at this. Even at Denver, I take Pittsburgh here.
Now let's talk about a fantasy giant, though, real quick from that game. Was it Boswell? Yeah, it was Boswell.
They've always had those good kickers. And, that's the way that, that's why you get, if you're going to draft a kicker you want to draft your kickers later. And the other thing I always do is I only draft one kicker. I don't want 2 kickers because I don't want to think about it. It's hard to get the kickers right every week because even if you have a heavily offensive team, there might be a week where they're just not punching in the end zone. They get a lot of field goals. But a team like Pittsburgh, their offense, so their defense puts them in field position. That's really what happened. And then their offense sucked. And they got like maybe 5 or 10 yards on offense, which was enough to get them in the field goal range. And that's really it. It isn't a story about efficient offense. It's a story about crappy offense and strong defense. And so a team like Pittsburgh, of course, is a great team for kickers a lot of times. It's been through history.
Up next, we have the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. What was this, 2 years ago? It was the AFC Championship game?
Yeah, it's been a bit. And I'll tell you, Joe Burrow does not look the same. He looks like he's having problems with his wrist. Jamar Chase, not a good game. I mean, this is one of the tougher calls this week. Like, who do you start here? Maybe Zach Moss. I'd start him. But I'm looking at Chase and I'm going, you got to start Chase because he's number 1 wide receiver, right? Andre Esteve, somebody you want to look at here. But Burrow did not right now. If I have another guy, I'm not starting Burrow right now because these guys don't look in sync, and Burrow doesn't look healthy. So I'd be shying away from Burrow in this game. Now Kansas City, I just don't think this is going to be a great matchup. I think it's going to be a blowout. I think Kansas City is going to blow them out, and I think Mahomes. Cincinnati still has that good defense, but I think Mahomes, Pacheco, I think Rashee Rice, Worthy, Kelsey, all starters, not even a question. And I think it's gonna blow out. I think it's a 2-touchdown, maybe 2-touchdown to 17.1 for Kansas City.
So it sounds like you're taking Kansas City minus the 5.
Yeah, I'd take it. Maybe I'll up the line and I'll take it -10 because I think they're that much stronger. Cincinnati looks in disarray, and yeah, they might get up, but don't forget too. Kansas City has the big advantage of having like 11 days rest after that win. It's a big deal. Always think about that if you're wagering. That's a big deal for these guys. The Monday night roll into the Sunday game is a tough thing to do. And now Kansas City playing Thursday got that advantage of having the extra, 4 days rest, and then they're a week out. So the 11 days of rest for these guys is huge.
Next up, we have the Chicago Bears taking on the Houston Texans in Houston. Prime time game right
But this was one of and if you're playing like daily fantasy sports or pick contests, everybody was discounting Caleb, and he really didn't make it by that many yards. If you only discounted him 50% of what his projection was, I don't think he even made it because he had 80. What did he have? 89 yards passing.
I thought it was in the 70s.
It was pretty crappy. So he was not exceptional at all. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of stuff like this for him over the beginning of the year. And this is one of the more fun teams that nobody's really watched a lot of because they don't play a lot of national games, but we're going to see them a little bit more this year on national TV games, which is exciting, right? So we're going to get the Sunday night game, which is great, but you're going to really get to see Stroud and those guys. And Caleb, this would be a really fun matchup. I think you're going to see a little more out of Caleb, or it's going to be a blowout. But I think Caleb will have a 2-touchdown game in this, and I think you're going to see a good game from Swift, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Dunze might not play, so be careful on that one. Maybe a good game. Watch out for Cole Kmet in this one. For Houston, I told you right as we talked about it last week, I said, Stephon Diggs, 2 touchdowns. I said, doesn't matter. He's the star. If Prince is in your band and he's just subbing in, he's still the star. Nico Collins tanked out. Okay, good. But Stephon Diggs is the star wide receiver. That's why he got the 2 touchdowns. So he's a guy you're going to play. And this team is this is probably one of the best wide receiver corps here, with even Dalton Schultz being, top 10, 12 player at tight end. Mixon looked great. Stroud, this is a heavy offensive team. Here's what I think the Bears will play this a little closer, like a 34-24 Houston win. But I'd be a little concerned about, but Caleb has to play better to even make it that close. That's why I think this is kind of a game where you'll see the swing in offense where it'll be kind of designed as a fast, productive speed kind of game. And, you do have the advantage of the turf over the Bears playing on the grass, which I think that makes the game a little bit faster in Houston. So, I like the Texans in this game by at least 10, but I do think the Bears will be more productive on offense in week 2.
All right, so you're definitely taking the Houston minus the 6 points then. Loud and clear. We've got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. A Falcon's going to beat an Eagle any day of the week. Now, I don't know if they're going to beat him on the football field, but
the Falcons gonna be. He's the dirtier bird, is what you're saying. Is the Falcons?
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, here's what I saw. I didn't see a lot out of Kirk Cousins. I saw a guy. So it was really funny. The guys who didn't have the ball very much, meaning they released it, their quick releases, were Cousins and Rodgers, and they looked both the same. They look like they look like statues, just getting rid of the ball. He did not look good. And if I was the owner of the Falcons, I'm like, wow, I want to see what Penix looks like. You're gonna start hearing that. If we get 6 weeks of this, you're gonna see them calling for Penix because Cousins did not look good week 1, and this is a pretty good offensive team. Pitts is a top 10 tight end. Drake London is a top 20 wide receiver. Bijan Robinson, probably, one of the top running backs, top 10 running back for sure. And Algier is top 30 running back, or top 30 or 40. So you got a lot of talent here. And if Cousins looks as bad as he looked in week 1, now give him the advantage or the benefit of the doubt a little bit because nobody really played in the preseason. But, I didn't see a lot out of Cousins in week 1. He looked pretty bad. Eagles looked like, they looked pretty amazing in the Packers game. Their offense was it was a pretty good offensive team. They made a couple mistakes early, but they overcame them. But, Hurts for sure. Barkley looked amazing. The one thing I would be, I'm not cautioning the Eagles, but they got to watch the usage of Barkley. I think what happens, you get these guys, we've seen it time and time again, running backs have 5-6 good years. Well, he had a great game, but I'd just be wary. They have Gainwell they can use back there too. But, all your guys should start here in this game here, Hurts, Barkley, Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. And don't forget, they get the advantage too. They played the Friday game. So this is a team also who has 9-10 days of rest coming back, even though they did have the flight from Europe. They had a full 9 days of rest for this game, and they're playing back at home. So that's a big advantage. The wager in this one, I'd definitely be running with the Eagles here, as the Falcons offense did not look sharp at all.
Eagles 6.5. Well, that wraps up this week 2 NFL. Thank you for joining us. Anything else to add for that one?
No, I just say keep hitting the waiver wire. We didn't get any of the key awesome running backs injured in week 1. And I'm only saying that not because I'm rooting for an injury, but it just happens. You get those key injuries in week 1, and you sometimes can pick up like massively great backs who can change your season in fantasy. So I'd say keep hitting that waiver wire, because that changes your team. My teams have half the time never looked the same at the end of the year when I drafted them.
Yeah, see if you can get any of those guys from Miami. I think you were saying earlier that in one of your leagues somebody went ahead and dropped him just because he was hurt. So
somebody dropped Mostert, which I think is a give up pretty early. I mean, he's got a chest injury, but that's not a long-term injury. I think that was kind of a stupid move. So we're definitely targeting somebody like that. And you get a lot of other guys that guys just give up on too early. So I'd be targeting it. I'd be looking for it all the time. It happens every year.
All right. Well, we will see you next week.